Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Customize Your Success Summit. I'm Tina Parker, your host, and I'm so excited to have with us today Kendra Porter. Kendra is a TEDx speaker. In fact, Kendra and I did our TEDx together, and that's how we met. Super amazing. I will put the link in here so you can watch it for yourself. She is an award-winning image consultant and wardrobe stylist. As founder of HonorYourStyle, she's worked with thousands of clients, helping them to reimagine their style. Kendra uses fashion as a tool to develop personal and professional brands, helping you communicate who you are and stand in your power. Her motto, honor your style, honor you. Currently, you'll find Kendra on a microphone, producing events for well-known retailers like Neiman Marcus. She's facilitating trainings on personal branding and style, teaching at the Fashion Institute of Technology, or in studio, dressing on-air talent at NBC Sports and the Olympics. You may have seen Kendra on press outlets like Yahoo, CNN, Essence, Marie Claire, and Black Enterprise, just to name a few. So Kendra, thank you so much for sharing your time and your story with our audience. I'm so excited to have you here.
No, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Hey, so I'm curious. I mean, you've really carved your path the way that you want it to be in life. So, but when you were growing up, what was the definition of success that you were taught or that you just picked up along the way?
You know, what's interesting. Success was anything that made me feel joy, to be honest. Right. So here's why. It was joy and right, am I at the top of my game, whatever that was, right? And here's where that comes into play. I played sports, I was in school, I started school early, so I was ahead of the class, right, in terms of grades and all of that, right? So where I was younger, let's put it this way, I was in 5th grade, right? And it's like when you start to change classes. And I remember being in science class and me and this girl, Addie Perez, I don't know why I remember this, but I do. Addie Perez were sitting in the front of the classroom in Mrs. Rinaldi's science class, and we finished our science book and then like half of the semester, like half of the school year, we were like, so what else do we do? So I was always kind of sort of moving forward. And my mother was always like, if I got an A, it was like, well, where's the A+? And I'm like, nah. Right. So there was always that push. And for me, saying joy is because, right, if I got a B or if I got an A, it was always like, where's the next? And that didn't feel good. So for me, it was, am I doing what I love and am I enjoying it? And so for me, it was, can I merge the two for success for me?
Yeah, and it actually sounds like that may not have changed so much for you as you grew up, which is great. So how does that play out for you now? And has your definition evolved in any way?
The definition, I think, is still evolving, right? I think as I grow and change, that definition grows and change. And so I think for me now, it's still definitely finding joy in what I do and loving what I do, but also making sure that I am considering my value and my worth in what I do, right? And I feel like women in particular have this way of not valuing what they do and who they are. And I have always been a firm believer of my value. And so making sure that as I step into the next level of whatever it is that I'm doing, am I considering where I truly am and what that value really brings? And so it's always taking that next step to truly evaluate and consider all of the things that are, moving in my life, and making sure that there's balance in that.
Yeah. I think the balance and the evaluation is key when you bring that up, because you're right. We tend to just barrel through and instead of stopping and going, is this really what I want to be doing? Am I really making the impact and having the contribution that I want? And a lot of times we don't do that. So along your journey though, where you are now, how have you worked that into your pathway, evaluating to make sure you are where you want to be?
Well, part of it is, right, thinking about, it's one of those things like, am I satisfied? And we're never really truly satisfied, right? As humans, we get to that goal, and then you're like, okay, what's next, right? And it's, as an entrepreneur, so I haven't been an entrepreneur all my life, right? I have been the person that has always paved my path, whatever it is I want to do. And so when I look back, gosh, like 20 years ago, right, when I graduated school, and it was, well, what do you want to do and how much money you want to make? And I said, right, I wanted to, first job out of school, and I said, I wanted to make $40,000 a year. This is 20 years ago. So I want to make $40,000 a year. I want to have autonomy and I want to travel. And people were like, I'm sorry, what? But truth, I made $40,000 a year. Actually, I made more than $40,000 by the end of my first year. I traveled for business, and my boss at the time was not where I was. So I had autonomy in what I did. And so you can, if you put that intention out there, start to carve your path, right? And do that. Now, I think that there's a balance because, right, if you ask my parents on a personal note, they'd be like, she was a hard child to raise, right? Because I always wanted to go my own way and do my own thing. But I kind of sort of, as I've grown, right, you start to tailor that to the context of where you are and what that looks like for your life as a whole. I think now it's really, am I enjoying what I do? And then if I'm not happy, what is it that I'm not happy about, right? What do I need to figure out? What do I need to change to make that happy? So where people, it's one of the things that stuck with me from when I was just young working in the industry. People said, well, I'm not happy, and they'd complain about their jobs all the time, but they've been there for like 20 years. I'm like, well, why are you still here? Like, you should enjoy what you do. And it's, I get it. People have families and they've got responsibilities and all of that, but you can still enjoy what you do and make a living, right? Like, you can move into a place where you are happy, whether it's the culture, the people, the work, whatever it is, right? Take the time to find out what that means for you and move in that direction. And you'll find, I find, right, and as I talk to other people, right, you start to find where you fit in and what brings you joy. And you can make money out of that. Like, you don't have to say no. And so for me, I think that's been the constant evaluation of trying to figure out, okay, am I happy? Am I no longer happy? What is it that needs to change? Now, I'll say this, I started in events and marketing, right? I worked in sports and entertainment, moved from that into nonprofit, spent my time in nonprofit for almost a decade running nonprofits here and internationally, came back and was in that world, lost my job twice in 3 years and said, okay, I'm done, right? I've worked for other people. I've put so much time and effort into other organizations, which I loved, and I'm still connected to those organizations and or people, but I need to do something for me, right? And what does that look like? And so then began the journey into, right, entrepreneurship. I started off as a consultant in nonprofit, and then decided that I really wanted to move into a dream that I had since I was a young girl, which was owning my own business and having a boutique. In that process, my business mentor at the time said, well, for all the services you want to offer, why don't you consider becoming an image consultant? And I was like, well, what's that? Right? Like, everybody knows celebrity stylist and all of that, but I was like, well, what's an image consultant? And so as we talked more about it and I learned more about it, it really was the services that I was offering my clients, looking at, right, who you are as a person, your lifestyle, your personality, what you're trying to express, all of those things. And I was like, oh, I can do this in New York and not have like $500,000 in inventory and overhead for a brick and mortar and staff. Okay, let's do that. Let's do that.
Like, I like that idea. That's good.
I like that idea a lot.
And it's aligned, right? I think that's a big thing too. It is aligned with who you are and what you want to do. And why not? Why not give it a shot? When it's aligned, it brings you joy. You can be successful at it because it comes so naturally to you. It's who you are. I think that's great. And you said a mentor shared that opportunity or that option with you.
Correct.
And I think as you bring that up, something that I'd love for our folks to consider as they're listening to this is, who are the mentors in their life? Sometimes we think, oh, I don't need anybody, or I don't know anybody, or no, there's so many people in your life who can mentor you in different ways. And it's really important to reach out for that. So on your journey then, that pivotal moment when you knew, like, this is what I want to do, and you committed to it fully, right? How long ago was that?
I mean, I started my business 11 years ago. So I would say committed fully to the business, I would probably say 12. researching and doing that piece of it, because I was interested, was probably maybe 16 years
Okay.
ago,
Yeah.
right? Like I was in nonprofit, but I was actually up at University of Massachusetts, my alma mater. I will always talk about them, but I was there and on campus, and I was teaching and working with them. And so I said, well, I've got all of these business resources here at the library. Why don't I start to look at what it looks like to have a store back in New York? Because I hadn't planned on being there. I was actually teaching and commuting to teach. So I said, let me take a look and see what that looks like. And so started doing the research and the market research and all of that. And then when I came back and moved to New York, it was the opportunity to then start to look at what does that look like, building it out.
Mm-hmm. That's really great. And so coming from Massachusetts to New York, building your business out the way that you want it to be, did you ever question or second guess yourself along the way? And if so, what got you back on track?
I did. So I think there are a couple of things. When I first started, I was gung-ho 100%. So anybody knows me, I'm a night owl to begin with. So I would work straight through the night, and I'd like sleep a couple hours, and I'd get up and I'd be working through the day. Right. And it's when you have, and when, of course, when I was younger, so I also had the energy to do all of that. Right. I think it was probably a couple years in where I had been running my business full time for 3 years, and I wasn't getting ahead. The one thing that I will say to anybody who's an entrepreneur is that, to me, it is always the level up. So when you go from startup to growth, that growth phase is a challenge. And if you don't know how to maneuver that, you get stuck and you become stale. And that's where I kind of sort of, for me, I felt that's where I began, like feeling stale and feeling stuck. And so I was, at the time, if you know the woman Stacey London from the show What Not to Wear,
Mm-hmm.
she had a company called Style for Hire. I was also working with them as a stylist and market manager for them. And so it was like, okay, when my company was going stale and that happened, I was like, okay, let me figure out what's what. Her business then closed, right? And so I was like, okay, well, what's next? One of the other stylists that I was working with at the time said, would you be interested in personal shopping? And it just so happened that in Connecticut, out of Stamford, they were looking for a new personal shopper. And I was like, you know what? My business is stale. Like, maybe this is a way to grow into the Connecticut market, because I'm in Westchester County. So it's right. I'm half an hour from the city, half an hour from Greenwich, and well, I'm actually 15 minutes from Greenwich, but like half an hour from Connecticut, right? It's all of that. And I was like, a reverse commute into Connecticut works for me. And ended up getting the position, right? Stayed with them, planned on staying for a year, ended up staying 4 years, right? And then also felt stale again, right? So in that process, it was, okay, let me have some stability with getting another full-time job, but still growing my business and expanding. And then that became stale, right? So it's where you feel like you're stale and you're trying to rework it and understand, well, what's next? And at that point, I had pitched them an opportunity about me traveling and doing events, because I think what I love to do, although it's styling, but it is helping educate people about how to dress and what works for them, right? So for me, it's events. I came from events and sports and entertainment, so that's still part of me. And that's truly who I am from the core. So how can I do that in fashion? Well, it was to do these events in retail and with designers and all of that, talking about how do you dress for your body, or how do you dress for your career, or any of those things. And so I pitched that to the president of Lord & Taylor at the time. They were on board, and they said, we'd love to do this. We'd love to create, right, this position for you. And then unfortunately, like the head of HR for the region I was in, they let her and her team go like 2 weeks after that conversation. So had to rework and figure that out, right? And so it's always, how do you then create, like, where do you feel stuck? And how do you get out of, okay, this is feeling stuck. What do I want to do? And how do I then make that happen? And for me, at the time, it was like, okay, I can stay with Lord & Taylor. It's my favorite place to shop. It was my favorite, like, I loved working there. So I was like, how can I still work within this framework to get what I want? And, unfortunately, it didn't pan out that way in the end, but it was the ability to know that, no, this is valuable, right? There is a company that's willing to pay for this, and have been still doing those same types of things for other retailers.
Yeah. And I love that you share that journey, because it's twisty, right? It's not point A to point B, straight line, linear, there you go. Right. And I think a lot of people, especially like when they start a business or they start a new endeavor and transition, they have this vision, like I'm here, I'm going to be here. But all the messiness in between, we don't know what that's going to look like. Right. And it can be discouraging and it can feel like I'm stuck. I'm not getting far enough along quickly where I want to be. And I love that you bring up the fact that the evaluation, you get to look and go, okay, how does this play in to my pathway? How does this play into my idea of where I want to be? Because we're learning something along the journey that's actually moving us forward. And it may not seem like it at first, but after a while you go, oh, that's why that happened for me.
Right. And this is one of the things that I've learned is that, right, everything is happening for me, right? And there's a part of the Bible that also talks about that, right? It is everything is happening for your good, right? For those that love the Lord. So for me, it is taking that and looking at all the situations. It's not, why is this happening to me? It is, why is this happening for me? Because even in those instances where you're like, oh, this feels like hell, the question is, what's the learning lesson? Because if you take a look at it from that perspective, it shifts your mindset and you're like, okay, well, wait, I know that I either didn't do this or needed to do this, so I should have done that this way. And now you know moving forward, right, how to then deal with situations like that and continue to take, the next steps and not feel like you're just stuck sitting in it, right? Yep. It makes you think about how do you take those next steps for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of the work that I do with people is that mindset piece, right? And it's like, you get to shift that. How is this working for my greatest growth? It may not feel good. It may be not something that you want to go through ever again in your whole life, but there are things that happen, and everything that does happen for us, it happens for our greatest growth.
No, 100%. And what I appreciate about the work that you do is that I was like, all of those learning lessons, I did not learn by myself, right? I've had coaches, personal and professional coaches along the way, and they've been so helpful to get me to that next level, to help me see past what I couldn't see, right? Like I honestly did not take that piece of looking at it from like, what am I learning from it? That did not come until I had my coach who said, everything's happening for you. And the stronger that I built my foundation in my belief system, it was like, oh no, that's true. Like God said, this is what, right? Everything's happening for you. So let me take a second look at how I'm looking at life. And not for nothing, it's when we look at things through a negative lens, that is all that you see.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Versus you take the same situation and you look at it, sometimes it does not feel positive. Right? But if you take a look at it from possible, then it's a different perspective and you're like, oh, okay. And it still may not feel as great, but it's not as, I don't know if it's constricting, or it's not as heavy a feeling and a burden, right? Yeah. When you look at it, you're like, okay, you're like, all right, let me breathe in this situation and take a second look. And it feels lighter. It's still work that you got to go through, but it doesn't feel as heavy. Right?
Absolutely. It doesn't feel as heavy. And it actually, you're rewiring your brain. Like this is a part that a lot of people don't recognize, is that like you have a reticular activating system in your brain. And it's basically when something comes into your awareness, you start to see it all over the place. Mm-hmm. It's like when you buy a new car, right? You buy that brand new shiny Beamer and all of a sudden you're like, 100 other people went out and bought a Beamer today too. No, they had it. Sorry to burst your bubble, right? But when things come into your awareness, you start to see other things that are similar or aligned. So if that's a negative lens, you start to see all the negative things and it does feel heavy. But when you can shift that and start to look at why is this happening for me? What is this allowing me to do that maybe I wasn't capable of before, right? When you can shift those kinds of things, you do start to see those other things that are positive and aligned and moving you closer to where you want to be.
100%. And I will say, it's funny, I lost my father 2 years ago. And at that point, I'm a caregiver for my mother and my father. They both had Alzheimer's. And everybody was like, oh, you should go see someone, see a therapist to help you, just deal with the caregiving aspects, right? And living life and trying to do everything that I do. Yeah. And I was like, no, I will, right? And I was like, no, and I looked and I didn't look, and then I looked and I didn't look. And it wasn't until my dad passed and I couldn't hold it together anymore. And I was like, okay, I'm like, clearly I need to see somebody. And what I will also say is through this process, and not even just as an entrepreneur, but through life, honestly, mental health is so important that we don't realize, right? What I now realize is that I've suffered through depression, through also those periods of times where I felt stuck in my business and didn't know what to do. And I've always just pushed through, which has gotten me to where I am. And so I'm thankful for that. But sometimes people can't, and nobody understands that, right? Someone can talk to you about being depressed and you're like, oh, okay, you're sad for one day. It's not just one day, right? It's more than that. And it's not just, oh, think through a positive lens. Because there were those days where I'm like, yeah, no, there's no
Not happening. Yeah.
Right. And so having someone to talk to and talk through it and understand the emotional pieces of your life and what's going on and how to deal with it and address those things are also just as important. Whether you're a leader, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you are, whether you're a parent, understanding how to also manage your life and not necessarily give that burden to a friend or a partner, because that's also the other thing I feel it also happens, right? People then talk to their friends and their friends are like, okay, can you stop telling me all these stories, right? Or you have your partner and yes, you want to share, but it's also, can you share with your therapist so that you can walk into your relationships, right? And say, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. This is, what I've talked to my therapist about, and this is how it's best for me to move forward. So they can support you in that. Not just, okay, I need to talk to you because I'm stressed out. Okay, well, they don't have the tools either because they're not a therapist. So they want to give you the support. So it's really also, I think, maintaining mental health along with that and being mindful of that. And for those who are, feel healthy and are good, like also having the compassion for others, right? Understanding what that also looks like for others in your life.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. Because I think a lot of people feel like they're alone in that journey, or that it's weak to share it. I can't share it. What are people going to think? People are going to think that you're just like them because we're all going through these things, right? So we get to take the stigma off of that and go, hey, everybody's got stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So let's work together to get beyond that, because what I equate it to for a lot of folks is, like you said, you pushed through and you were grateful for that because it got you to where you are. And there are times where that makes sense and you've got to push through. What I bring up for folks, and sometimes they go, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. When you put your hand on a hot stove, you want to know that you have your hand on a hot stove, right? So the pain of that, you're like, oh yeah, I needed to know that. But do you keep it there?
Right.
No, you remove it, right? Because you instinctively know, get the hand off the hot stove so that I don't burn myself. Right. Well, the same kind of thing happens internally with our feelings and how they come up and how we move through life. And sometimes we no pain, no gain, push through it, work harder, right? All these things that we learn when we're younger. And we think that's how it's got to be. And then we wonder why, wait, I got this great accomplishment, the bank account, the 2.5 kids, the white picket fence, the whatever, right? The title. Why am I not happy?
Right.
Why am I not fulfilled by this? Well, because you kept your hand on the hot stove to get it. You don't have to. There are other ways, right? You can enjoy it and still make it happen. Right. And so it just takes shifting. And it's awesome for you to share your story that you've recognized these things. You've done something, you've done the work, you've shifted, you are enjoying where you are. Because you said your definition of success when you were growing up is to enjoy it. Right. And you're doing that now. And so as we wrap this up, I'd love for you to share, like, what do you believe is the most important thing for people to focus on if they want to customize their success and carve their own pathway?
I think really evaluating, right, where they are, right? That's my biggest thing. I do this exercise with my students and I do a similar exercise with clients. But I ask them, who are you, right? Like in this moment right now, today, who are you, right? If you were to kind of sort of think about who you are. Okay, great. How did you get there, right? Like, how did you become the person that you are today? Where do you want to be? Right. And this isn't saying that you're unsatisfied with your life now, but ideally, we are always growing, right? I'm like, if we get to reach the 99, we're growing through that time. So where do you want to be, right? Whether it's 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And why do you want to be there, right? Why is it that you want to get there? And then what are the next steps? Like, how do you plan on getting there? Right? Because whether you're a student in college, right, looking at graduating, you've got to figure out what classes you're going to take, what you want to do for a career, right? And how do you want to move through that? How you want to move through, right, the school and opportunities that arise to get to where you want to be to start your career, right? If you're an adult and you're looking at your life and assessing, okay, well, if you're not happy, where do you want to be? If you are happy, where are you growing and how are you developing over time? And so it's still a where do you want to be and what's that next path? And so for me, I think those questions really help us evaluate. And nobody ever, not nobody, let me rephrase that. Let me say no, I'll take off nobody and never. But a lot of the times, unless we're stuck, we don't really sit down to evaluate what that's like, right? Of who we are, why we're here, and right, what do I want to do next and how do I get there? Right? We only do that when you're in business and you're looking at, okay, what are the goals, right? So you look at the key metrics, your KPIs, all of that. Okay, but also think about it personally. Like this isn't just about business. This is also about you as an individual, right? Do you want to learn a language? Do you want to travel more? What are those things that, and for me, of course, right, bring you joy? And how do you get there? So when I talk about balance, and I have friends who are like, there's no such thing as balance. Balance is different for everyone, right?
Yes. It's not an equal. It's,
right.
Yeah, it's what works for you.
It's what works for you. And understanding what that looks like, it may be, right, 20 hours of work and 20 hours of play and 20 hours of something else. Like figure out what that looks like for you and then move in that direction so that you can feel fulfilled in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And along the journey, because the other thing, right, we did the TEDx and I said this at the dinner table when we had afterwards, and I was like, it's just me, or I'm like, did we do a TEDx today? I don't remember doing that. Right? Because it wasn't the destination, it was the journey, right? It's the journey of preparing and doing and studying and writing and rewriting and editing to get to there. Yes, that's the destination, but that's not, your growth isn't the destination. Your growth is that journey along the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And then we're gonna wrap it here. And I just am so grateful for everything that you've shared. So much wisdom, so many nuggets. I hope that people take and actually apply to their life, because it's one thing to listen to it. It's another thing to go, yeah, let me take a step in that direction for myself.
Right.
Right. So thank you so much, Kendra. So appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Tina, for having me. I appreciate being here. And I hope everyone, will remember, honor your style, honor you.
Honor your style, honor you. Love it. All right, everyone. We'll see you later.
Bye.